Thank you very much for joining us on the lead today, Ms. Fair. And the very first question I'm going to ask you is, what exactly is happening in terms of diplomatic equations, military equations between India, Pakistan, the US, as well as this, the Gulf countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia. What exactly is going on?
So, I think backing up, I think Pakistan's calculation when it went ahead and ordered, as I believe it did, the Jaish-e-Mohammed attack. I don't think these attacks happen without the ISI's imprimatur, right? And by the way, Imran Khan is completely irrelevant to these things. I don't even consider him is a part of the equation. I think one of the reasons why Pakistan thought it could get away with this Pulwama attack was that it was really banking on American cover, because President Trump wants to withdraw from Afghanistan, no matter how dangerous, no matter how ill-advised it is, because it's a campaign promise. And he fetishizes executing his campaign promises, no matter how dangerous they are. And Pakistan is very clearly an important part of the U.S. being able to have some fig leaf that will allow it to leave Afghanistan. And you could see the expectations that Pakistan had when the Pakistani ambassador here in D.C. began hollering and screaming that the United States was behaving not as expected, and it should have been putting pressure on India, and instead India was given a free rein. So I think that these equations about the relevance of Pakistan to President Trump played out in the beginning of this crisis. And I think that also explains in considerable measure why Pakistan escalated in its response to the use of air power. Right? It really felt that the U.S. was going to be in a position of covering for Pakistan. Now, going to India's calculations in terms of how it responded, and I think there's an election. The attack itself was calibrated to be provocative. And India, in the last several years, has been pretty much told by the United States that you have a right to defend yourself. The U.S. had long ago dispensed with these talking points about, we encourage both sides to, negotiate and all that kind of rubbish. So I think those international structures, in some ways, explain certainly Pakistan's behavior. But I think the most important thing with respect to India's behavior was really just domestic considerations. I think particularly after Uri, and actually the movie, in some sense, Modi has to live up to his movie. In some ways, Modi had to live up to and beyond what happened, not at Uri, but in the film Uri. So I think the next, so once we start getting into the conflict itself, what I see is that deception played a very large role in finding an off-ramp for the crisis.
And by deception, you mean what exactly? I mean, this is a very interesting term you've used. So what exactly do you mean by deception?
Exaggerated, not verifiable claims that satisfied a clamoring Indian public. And on the Pakistani side, truth doesn't matter anyway. So when the Pakistanis said kuch nahi hua, many Pakistanis were very happy to take that as confirmation of Indian ineptitude. But then no one questioned, agar kuch nahi hua to fir, why are you using air power? And the way you look at the dogfight, both sides can actually claim a victory in some ways. Even though India lost 2 aircraft and a pilot was captured, we still don't know what's the status of the second pilot, do we? Has anyone,
No.
I haven't heard anything about the status of the second pilot.
No, we don't.
So while Pakistan can claim that victory, India can claim the victory that it apparently, reportedly, allegedly, no confirmation yet, sent 12 aircraft into Pakistani airspace, did not meet any resistance. And then when Pakistani jets did scramble, the Indians mounted a very forceful countermeasure, and nothing happened on the ground. So both sides, from these not necessarily accurately described series of events, could claim a victory. And that, I think, allowed an off-ramp for the crisis. And when I say off-ramp for the crisis, I don't mean everything is going back to normal. What I mean to say is no further escalation, diminishing the chance of outright war. I mean, we're still seeing very aggressive shelling on the LOC, and we would expect that. I mean, anyone who didn't expect that doesn't know this conflict dyad very well. But I actually think deception played a very important role in giving an off-ramp to the crisis.
Now, of course, as you've already spoken about it, this comes back to the whole point that you said about deception. You know, a lot of confusing, conflicting reports have been coming out, and the international media too has been talking a lot about the Balakot airstrikes, which either happened or did not happen. So there's a lot of confusing, conflicting versions. What do you think actually happened?
So I find it, by the way, this also is going on in the United States, right? Anyone who questions the wisdom of the dear leaders in our respective countries, we are anti-national. I have been told by my own citizens that I should go find a new place to live because I have problems with what, many problems, I may say, with what President Trump has done and is doing. And not only that, the insouciance of the Republican Party. I see a very worrisome parallel in India. It is not anti-national to want to know the truth. And both of our countries have enough history of not being told the truth that I would say it's anti-national to not demand the truth. We do know that some of the early claims about the Myanmar raid were not true. Some of the early claims about the Uri raid ended up not being true. And there's a lot, and I'm a well-wisher of India. I would like to believe that India did everything that it said it did. But when I look at international organizations who have used open source satellite imagery, there's not a lot of evidence to support India's maximalist claims. Now, I was on an NDTV segment on Friday where the former Air Chief Tyagi says it doesn't matter if we didn't do what we said we did. What mattered was intention. And I said, well, actually both matter. Because we don't actually, now that all of these different accounts have arisen, we don't actually know what the intention was, right? We have an Indian Express article that says actually Indian aircraft never left India's side of the LOC and that it used standoff munitions, and that might explain in some measure why the damage assessment was not impressive. We have another countervailing report that NDTV put out that says, no, that's not true. The Indian government has these images. But unfortunately, satellite images are internationally available, and there have been at least two international analysts, one American-based and one Australian, and they have zero political interest to politicize this in one way or the other, and they find no evidence to support these claims. I'm not in the position of saying who was right and who was wrong, but as an analyst.
Okay, and so basically, is this all about the elections?
Well, I think Pakistan always uses terrorism for strategic reasons. Its reasons are strategic, although we may not consider them to be strategic in consequence. But I think the timing of this attack and many of the provocative features of the attack, in my assessment, were motivated to allow Modi to have a very muscular response. I mean, Indians may not want to hear this, but I've been studying Pakistan my entire adult life. I have all these gray hairs to show for it, and wrinkles. Pakistan's deep state narratives are best served by someone like Modi.
Right.
And the reason is, and you can take a look at Modi's defense budget, right? Modi's defense budget doesn't actually do much for India's national defenses, right? He talks a big game, but he himself has not been able to deliver anything that would be a game changer for Pakistan.
Absolutely.
So for Pakistan, the cost of Modi, which is this, is something that it can totally bear given the big picture of Pakistan, which is the Pakistan army wants to run the country forever, directly and indirectly. And the reason for that is it's very lucrative for them.
Right.
And for them to maintain this position, they need to continually have an Indian boogeyman. And without, I have no cat in the Indian election. I don't care who wins. It's not my country. I've got my own, electoral disasters playing out here. But, and so I'm not denigrating Congress, but Congress does not inspire the big Hindutvadi boogeyman that plays very much into Pakistan's neuralgic obsession with the two-nation theory, like Modi does. I mean, Modi and the BJP and the RSS and the VHP, they are all living embodiments of justifications for the two-nation theory, right? And Pakistan lives off of that. So from Pakistan's point of view, and I may also add, I don't think a lot of Indians appreciate this, the Pashtun Tahfuz movement right now is probably the single most important thing confronting Pakistan domestically. And unlike the Baloch, whom it can kill with no consequence, Pakistanis don't care about the Baloch. They're 5% of the population. Pakistanis are very happy to exploit their resources. And they're also viewed as Indian proxies, right? So Pakistanis have no regard for the Baloch. They could literally kill every single Baloch, and Pakistan won't care. And journalists who cover this, they're threatened, they're killed, they're beaten up, their cars are set on fire. But you can do this to the Baloch. To sustain this kind of brutality against the Pashtuns, who are about 35% of the population, they're overrepresented in the army, you need to have a really big, scary neighbor. And quite frankly, BJP is that scary neighbor. Congress, Rahul Gandhi.
And my final question to you, now that we pretty much have not accomplished anything in a larger, broader sense, what does India now have to do going forward in terms of dealing with Pakistan and homegrown terror on Pakistan's soil? So that problem still is hanging fire. It's not been resolved yet. So what are the options before India, and what should India be doing?
So this is why the truth matters, right? This is why we need to know, did India send 12 aircraft into Pakistani airspace, drop ordnance, and return home? If India actually did that, then we're looking at refining a capability, right? So that tells us that India maybe didn't have the best coordinates on the Balakot attack. Maybe the ordnance themselves weren't the best ordnance, right? So if we actually knew that India sent 12 aircraft into Pakistani airspace and returned unarmed, but botched the execution, that tells us that this can be refined, right? But if we learn that India didn't actually send 12 aircraft, and in fact the Indian Express piece is more accurate, then we are probably more status quo ex ante than not, right? So I think this is why knowing what actually happened and knowing what the intention was and knowing how those outcomes aligned with the intentions really matter to understand, are we at the status quo ex ante, or did we in fact cross a Rubicon? That is with respect to Pakistan. I think India has crossed a Rubicon in the sense that Indians are not going to, and this is the problem actually with India exaggerating what it did, right? If in fact these claims have been exaggerated. It's the same problem as the Uri movie, Right. People are going to be demanding that India do things that it cannot do. And that is actually when things become very dangerous and very problematic, because politicians everywhere, your country and my country, they put their personal fortunes and that of their party ahead of their country. And the current Republican Party is a very good case in point. Democracies all over the world are being confronted with the emergence of parties that conflate the fate of their parties with the fate of their nations. So this is why understanding what did and didn't happen is so important, because the Indian public is going to demand a response the next time there is an attack like Pulwama. And it's imperative that Indians understand what is the envelope of the possible.
Okay, so what advice would you give Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Pakistan?
I don't do that.
Imran Khan?
I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do that. It's not my place. It's not my. I will gladly tell Mr. Trump what to do and where to go and how to get there, and I will gladly draw a map. But those are not things that I do in the business of other countries.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Fair, for your time. It's been wonderful, and we hope you will speak with the lead a lot more in the future. Thank you very much for your time.